Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm going to be talking about Etheria restart and kind of my experience as a day one rusher, farmer, and just enjoyer of the game. Now, in today's video, I'll be including not only just 5 tips, but also some things that I think might be helpful to any of you guys starting out. And with that, let's start with rerolling. Now, this might be something that a lot of you guys are split about, as some of you may find it pointless or tedious. However, for Etheria restart, because of how varied the challenges are in the game, as there's different bosses or hunts or activities that you have to farm in general, it does feel quite impactful if you do reroll for a strong SSR. Now, the thing is that with this, you might also be wondering if this is even necessary, as again, there are things like the guaranteed from the summon and things of this nature. However, because of how impactful or how important some characters are, and apologies, I did kind of luck sack with my LDs. I know, I apologize. I know I'm gonna get a bunch of hate for that. But in terms of that, because again, we have basically a targeted selector alongside a lot of free pulls and also a free SSR in the form of Leon, and again, in addition to all this, us needing a lot of specific teams or generalized teams in order to clear a lot of content, rerolling does actually present itself as something that could be worthwhile to do, especially if you're someone that's on the fence about whether rerolling is worth it at all. Now, in terms of the character that you should reroll for, I have a video documenting that and going into it more in depth, but really Tiamat alongside characters like Rosa and even not her, Zenyatta are pretty fantastic options. Now, I will say that if you choose Rosa or Zenyatta, these are more highly invested characters that you will see return on in the future. However, as of right now, characters like Tiamat do definitely feel very good to play with, especially if you are struggling in generalized PvE. Now, I do also want to say that as you're going through and playing, obviously, Etheria Restart, you will encounter the main story, and it is no surprise that even from the closed beta into the main game, progressing through the main story is extremely important. Now, again, pushing through the story gives you not only free pulls, it gives you resources to build up all your characters, basically. But in addition to this, you also have some activities or content that is locked behind the story, but in addition to this as well, you also kind of want to get through the story as soon as possible so you can lock the content that basically lets you run through the stamina as soon as possible. And again, with this and through also completing the story, you will have access to completing things like the hyperlink charter, which is basically your beginner's guide and some sort of an achievement based system where you get rewards, and you get a lot of rewards actually, in fact, through this, and you'll want to clear through most of the content or use this basically as your guide as you're clearing through all the content in the game, as again, you gain a number of free pulls, resources, upgrades, character exp, etc. Now, in terms of also understanding the mechanics of the game, if you are someone that is just clicking auto, maybe this tip isn't so much for you. However, if you're someone that is more interested in progressing and sometimes feel that you get locked behind certain mechanics, honestly, going out of your way to understand not only the characters that you have on your team, but also the bosses or the way that they interact with enemies is very important. Now, I can't stress this enough, and I know I'm basically saying to read and understand how the characters work, but certain characters do make sense, and certain teams will feel better when you actually have properly tuned or aligned characters. Now, again, I know this sounds super simplified, but there are a lot of people who I've seen trying the game, and they'll find certain characters very weak. And they'll also find that their damage is quite bad. However, again, and though this isn't something where you'll feel this effect immediately, and it won't clear, certain content where it doesn't line up, but one specific combo that I've seen a lot of people, even at the start of the game, kind of mix up or not really get super aligned is the way that even Gray works. And if you haven't heard about Gray is one of the strongest, honestly, characters that we have in the game, given that, again, he gives himself and his allies a crit rate buff alongside the extra turn. But in addition to this, assuming that you defense break, you of course, or rather, assuming you crit, you have a 80 to then 100% chance to defense break, and this is absolutely huge. Now, again, it should be no surprise to you, but since this defense break decreases the defense of enemies by 60%, lining up Gray or speed tuning your Gray so that he's faster than some of the other characters, including Leanne, or even, okay, again, a little lucky, but whatever DPS that you choose is very important, as again, if you do have characters that have defense breaks in general, you'll do more damage. Now, I do want to say, obviously, with Messiah, he does have his defense pen, so it doesn't make any difference for that. But since Leanne is free and a lot of people are picking her and obviously going to build her, and it's also for the story, or rather for the achievements guide, speed tuning at least your Gray and Leanne is very, very important. Now, beyond that, of course, there are other mechanics, like, for instance, the immunities and certain bosses that can't be debuffed that are also equally as important. And as I'll talk about in a little bit later, one of my favorite team compositions right now is just to have Marvell basically paired with anyone. And although I do think I need to spend a little bit more time cooking and understanding more of the cast and kits, as, again, we pretty much have like limited resources right now, at least to invest. As a result, one of the teams that I invested in early was Freya and Marvell, and that's because honestly, with how much combat readiness or with how much turn manipulation you can have between Leanne and the combo of Freya and Marvell, this is absolutely ridiculous. But to my point about reading and understanding the mechanics, there are some bosses or some stages, including one that I just recently encountered in the Anti-Sync Echoes, which again is basically just like a boss rush that you can go through, and it's a challenge. This Catchy the Guard, this boss or this encounter opens with immunities, which of course, if you're just running through auto, means that your Marvell will have much less effectiveness. Now, effectiveness not in terms of landing, but literally in terms of like, well, you're gonna hit against an enemy that's immune, so well, that's kind of pointless. Now, in terms of building characters, or on the topic building characters, however, we also should talk about shells, and honestly, your modules too, to some sort of degree. But what I've done, and I want to make a disclaimer here, some of the changes or some of the decisions I've made on my own account are not the best. Sometimes it's just out of greed or out of stupidity, which does not mean that you shouldn't do or follow the advice I'm going to say. I just can't help myself because I'm a stupid gacha player. In any case, in terms of shells, now you should definitely make sure to equip a shell in general, as again, it gives you a bunch of free base stats. But in addition to being quite cute, as there are a lot of them, there is a lot of boosts and honestly value from just having these shells equipped. Now, again, some of these have passive effects. They, of course, also provide you stats. But one of the shells that you should also be taking a look at or keeping an eye out for specifically, if I'm not mistaken, comes later on in Grim Pursuit, and that's actually this one right here, which is Black Flag. Now, of course, I'm not at this point, and I'll actually be talking about the breakpoints or the daily expectations for where you might feel most comfortable landing or getting to each day, so you can kind of keep up with everyone that's, you know, playing and trying to keep competitive. But if you are someone that is seeing this right now, Black Flag is an absolutely fantastic, spectacular sort of shell that you can invest in. Again, in terms of obviously the value from its passive, but also because of really just how effective it is and what matrices and everything that you can basically get about this shell is super, super impactful. And it's also just one of the best early shells that you can get access to. Of course, however, you will end up changing this for things like the red ones or the purple ones later, or rather just red and pink. I apologize. But before that, I do also want to mention that, again, in terms of upgrading the shells, something that I also wasn't super aware of up until, I guess, like maybe halfway through the closed beta, was that the currency that you use to upgrade your shells and your own agent are completely separate. Now, as you can see here, I have 735,000 training data. However, if I go to upgrade my character, of course, I only have 207,000. Now, again, for whatever reason, I thought the two were pretty similar. And just in general, I would have expected that since most of the other things in this game cost roughly, or they all use a similar currency, I thought that would have been the same, but actually it's different. Friendly reminder for you, if you, of course, aren't aware of that. Now, I kind of went over it as a bit of a teaser, but in terms of how much content there is in the game, it may seem overwhelming, and to be honest, it is. However, something that we do need to talk about is the game modes and what you might want to prioritize. Now, in terms of this, I think that one of the most effective ways to start off your experience with Etheria Restart is honestly just farming out for either the, I guess, like a baseline usable set from Threshold, and in some cases you also get free gear, which is amazing. However, farming for Animus EXP and Prowess material is something that I found myself to be doing an extreme amount of the time. Now, again, this is only day one, so of course you'll have more time, and really what you spend your early stamina on won't break or your account per se, but if you've even taken a look at some of the value that you get from leveling up the prowesses from characters, yes, you do gain things like flat attack. You do gain things like additional defense so you don't die. You do also, of course, give yourself the ability to upgrade the skills that you have, and in that sense it's quite good and worthwhile to, of course, invest in things like the GP outpost as you want prowess materials. That said, you do also get decent value from upgrading the base level and the base stats of characters through leveling them up, and so investigation is equally as good. Now, beyond that, you will also notice that there are some limited events that are, of course, available. This is different actually from the combat or from the closed beta, if I'm not mistaken. Shell Story is something new, if my memory serves me. However, Cupid Game is something that is also very worthwhile doing, as it gives you additional rewards, and these Magic Square gifts, of course, give you the premium currency, which is always nice. Now, beyond this, there are some more generalized tips that I want to give you if you are just starting Etheria for the first time, and the first one I want to talk about is actually in regards to stamina. Now, this is probably something that is taboo in most other games. However, I do think that it is kind of a trait or a trend at the start of a gacha game's release to do this. However, expending or exchanging your stamina for energy, especially when you get so much of it from like the early story and such, is a very good way to get yourself to the early to mid-ish end game, just so you can start farming more and more, and again keep up so that you can eventually get the set of gear that you can then compete in RTA or in PvP modes. Now, with this, I do recommend that at least for the first 4 days you do end up, of course, committing to refreshing or refilling with stamina, as again, it is very worthwhile and you are otherwise kind of gated. But again, this is even for free-to-play players, as again, the reward or the output that you get from this, assuming that you are playing more efficiently or you're playing more consistently, will vastly outmatch whatever amount that you save from, again, I guess just saving it and holding it for a future character. In any case though, if you are also thinking about summoning, and that's likely why you would maybe not spend some of your or invest technically on something like energy, I do want to say that, and although again it's different for me, this targeted summon is definitely something that you should hold off on. Now for me, again, not to say that my choices are ones that you should follow, however, you might want to hold off on using this targeted summon, as again, if you pull on the summon or the standard summon with some of these pulls, and again, these anima prototypes you're just given for free in game, you will probably want to save a couple pities worth of these summons first to see what other SSRs that you get first before you decide to choose a targeted summon. Now, I will say that to my quote-unquote in my quote-unquote defense, I did already get Zyada prior to this, and I did also I guess I did also technically get Hellkid. The only difference here would have been that I maybe could have waited out for a little bit longer to see if I got in Tiamat or Vilmoka, one of these other characters, but I just like Rosa so much specifically, so I decided to pull for her. That said, you should not probably do this if you're unsure or are trying to get the most out of the targeted summon, as again, you will get a lot of summons from the story and through other content and events, just for the purposes of, again, using it on the permanent summon. So with that, I would definitely encourage you not to use the targeted summon, at least until maybe 1 or 2 pities on the permanent summon banner, but otherwise feel free to do how you like. Now, I will also say that when you are committing to a team or teams in general, you should also consider that investing in a lot of characters, even if you have a lot of them, is likely going to leave you much worse off than you'd think. Now, the reason I say this is that even for the account that I have right now, yes, I have a lot of SSRs. Thank you, based RNG. Even despite me having a lot of SSRs, this is not the sort of game where even with like any amount of spending, well, you can kind of, but even with max amounts of spending, you will always find yourself at a disadvantage, or you will eventually find yourself unable to invest in characters just because there is a firm hard limit in terms of how many times you can refresh and how much energy you can get. Because of this, it is kind of worth it for you to, of course, consolidate and invest in more versatile units, as opposed to building the quote-unquote best in slot team when it comes to whatever content it is that you're fighting. That could be Doki, it could be it could literally be anything in the game, like shell farming. It could literally any sort of content that I'm thinking of off the top of my head. Terramaton, even Aurora, any of these content pieces or any of these bosses will require or will have a best in slot team, but especially at the start of the game, it's not really something that you can afford to do, as again, you don't have the resources to afford this. Even if you take a look at Leanne, who's again one of the free characters that you get at the start of the game, I'm so like starved in terms of resources. I can't even find most of these perfect lattices, whatever you'd like to call it, mostly because these are the most rare resource in the game. But even in terms of like module upgrading and stuff like this, again, not very ideal to plus 15 your stuff. However, just can't help myself. I apologize. Just a bit of a word of advice. However, even with all this investment, I'm not really at a point where I find myself very flexible in terms of who I can upgrade. And again, part of that is definitely because, of course, I've been upgrading and doing some mistakes as I've been starting the game. However, in order to avoid the same that I have, or the same situation or the same mistakes that I've been in, you should, of course, be a bit more careful in your investment and consolidate, maybe upgrade characters like Freya or Gray instead, though Freya really doesn't need that much investment outside of getting her just the correct main stats and some speed. Now, beyond this, I do also want to say that in case you're curious where the strength and the power from characters comes from, it really is just the modules and shells. Now, again, leveling them is pretty nice, but as I mentioned earlier, leveling modules beyond 12 until you acquire epic gear is pretty unideal. Now, again, sometimes I'll just come out and say it. I was competing with some other people in my Discord, and it kind of just became a stupid contest. In any case, for you, the viewer, I would definitely encourage you not to go beyond plus 12. And even at that point, some of the quests don't even require you to plus 12 some pieces. So if it feels like the set that you're upgrading is a bit grief, it's definitely not wrong to hold off or feel that you should maybe not invest too much. That said, you will be able to recycle and sell some of these pieces later, which you will be able to get some of your resources back from. Now, finally, what I do want to say is that, again, in terms of investment or in terms of builds, I will say that the speed encounter set, which you receive from the specific hunt or the quote-unquote fight, the module drop, Doki Doki, this is one of the most versatile encounters or fights in the entire game, as it gives you pretty PvP versatile gear. Now, I do also want to say that, again, this does mean that if at all possible, you should try and invest in characters that are more versatile, but still may allow you to farm out Doki Doki a little bit. That said, if you do plan on investing or plan on farming Teramaton, that's totally fine. Again, a lot of this early energy is not going to go so far one direction that you'll feel like you are losing or hemorrhaging just because you don't have it. That said, again, in terms of tuning, I do think that speed tuning your characters is pretty important. And of course, Doki Doki is one of the, well, I shouldn't say one of, it's the best way or one of the most consistent ways for you to get the speed set, which will then allow you to speed tune your characters. So do with that what you will. Now, finally, if you're curious about the upgrades, if you ever try to upgrade or find these materials to level up a character, shadow prints are things that can drop from Anima EXP or Animus EXP stages. And of course, you can use these initial or low level star prints like these ones here, the blue and the purple ones. And at some point, you'll be able to, or you'll be prompted with this little button over here to craft and then upgrade whatever you have in terms of your inventory, whether it's the blue or the purple quality of these shadow prints, which is again basically just your ascension material, and you'll be able to use it to level up your characters, which again can be very nice for the stats, obviously, but also just because, well, what else are you going to do with the shadow prints? That was a mouthful, and I apologize. However, just some parting ending thoughts about day one of Etheria Restart. Of course, the game does reset in the middle of the night for me, basically, but I've reached level 18 on my first day of playing. Yes, I have refreshed, and yes, I did participate in the rebate, because honestly, I'm a big fan of the way that Etheria Restart had kind of presented themselves, like both from the developers and both in terms of how candid and transparent they were with the direction of the game. Now, of course, there are some things that I would criticize and have some concerns with. However, in terms of, I guess, what I find to be maybe the most uncomfortable, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but it maybe feels a bit more neutral or maybe a bit uncommon for there to be so many different lock points for the main story. Now, again, I have still been able to do things like Arena Realm, and I have other content that I can challenge myself with, but it does feel kind of annoying that as you continue through the story, it just keeps locking you back to back to back, and you're therefore required to spend more energy to unlock it. But because of the way that the progression system is kind of set up, I don't feel too bad in general, just in terms of playing the game and how it is. I do think that if you are someone that is going to min-max and spend a lot of your time playing the game, though, what you'll find the most important or the most worthwhile in terms of I guess value from today's video will probably be this next information, which is talking about the day-to-day or the day-by-day kind of play-by-play. Now, in terms of day one, you should try to aim at least to, or you should try to aim to get level 17, as this unlocks a lot of the content that you will find I guess daily refreshes, or that you'll want to I guess start building your characters with. Now again, you will again be using things like the Doki gear and the Teramaton gear for your supports and your DPS, but by day 2, which is again hopefully tomorrow, you should try and hit level 26. With day 3, generally speaking, people are looking to aim for 31. Day 4, you're obviously going to be a bit further, and this is where things start to taper off a little bit, but you'll try to hit 35. Day 5, you'll try to hit 39, and pretty much all you'll be doing at some point is just refreshing and farming as you can. But by day 6, your final goal is to hit level 41, as this unlocks the module shop, and you also unlock the Ethernet rally. Again though, guys, with this, that was my day 1 and my initial plans and some tips and tricks that I hope you guys can take away from today's video in terms of Etheria Restart's initial launch. Honestly, the game has been pretty good for me. It's been running pretty well. I would also say maybe the biggest concern that I have with the game right now, and though again I've not been very efficient with how I use my resources, it does feel like the Etheria coins are quite limited. And again, even though you can argue that in some cases something like the perfect lattices or the lattices are a bit more rare, it does feel like no matter what I do, I run out of universal currency, and these Etheria coins is kind of an annoying gate, I guess, or like an annoying restriction or limiter for me, but of course I could always play it better. Thanks again for watching, everyone. Though, if you enjoyed or learned something from today's video, I'd appreciate it if you like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy, good night, enjoy Etheria Restart.